Hi, everybody. My name is David Alderman, and I am the founder of the Crossover Alliance Publishing Company. And I'm here for our second video. We had our first video last month where we celebrated our 3-year anniversary of the company, and we are very excited about that. And we are definitely hoping for many more years of bringing real-world content into Christian fiction. And this month we are starting off a series where we talk about different types of content in Christian fiction. And this month we're starting it off with sexual content. That definitely seems to be the one type of content that gets everybody talking. What differentiates it is we are talking about sexual content in Christian fiction. You'll definitely find sexual content in normal fiction. In TV series and movies. It runs rampant through society, the good and the bad. But we really wanted to discuss sexual content in Christian fiction because Christian fiction is meant to be held to a biblical and godly standard. So it's held to a higher standard than regular fiction. And for a very long time, sexual content has not been appreciated in Christian fiction or really allowed. And that's one of the reasons why the Crossover Alliance exists, is to allow for the publication of Christian fiction with these different types of content. Violence, cursing, sexual content, magic. These are all things that we're going to discuss over the coming months. But this month is sexual content, and we had our Alliance All Access Facebook event, which we do every month. We had it this last Wednesday on our Facebook page. And on it, we went ahead and asked everybody what their thoughts on sexual content in Christian fiction is. And we definitely got a lot of different responses, which I'll discuss here in a minute. But my own personal experience with this came when I was writing the first book of my Black Earth series, End of the Innocents. And there's a character in that book named Cynthia Ruin, and she is a high schooler who is definitely involved in a lot of sexually deviant acts. And she is raped at the end of chapter 1. And when I first wrote the rape scene, I was incredibly nervous about it. I felt like I had written something I shouldn't have written. But I felt like it had to be in there. I felt like it had to be written, and it had to be part of the story because it was part of the story. And so when I first allowed my editor to read it, I thought for sure she would red pen it right on out of there. And instead she told me it was done tastefully, and it fit in with the story and fit in with the characterization, and it was good to be in there. And that was the start of me really starting to write outside the boundaries of what I had grown to believe could be in Christian fiction. And after I published Black Earth, End of the Innocents, I got definitely mixed reactions. I had people calling me a heretic because I had included sexual content in my Christian fiction. I had some people praising me because I actually stepped outside the box and wrote about something that's taboo, or what was considered taboo. And it really pushed me as a writer, and I think it also allowed me to see what could be included in Christian fiction. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the responses that we had in our discussion for the Alliance All Access, and then I'll give you my thoughts on where I think sexual content fits in Christian fiction. We had some really good discussion going on. We had Michelle Mosley, who's actually one of our editors now and also author. She wrote, "One difficult but important thing to remember is that we are not competing with the common market when regards to Christian fiction. We have an agent more experienced and with better connections than any other. God puts a story and how to tell it on our hearts. We don't need to fit in with other writers and what is currently popular. He will get our stories where they need to be." And that's a very good point, because as Christian writers, we believe that we are fed inspiration for our writing, which normal writers, we are inspired. That's what makes us write. But Christian writers, I believe we get inspiration from God, or we get inspiration from what God put into us, our creative aspect. And we don't have to feel ashamed or guilty of that. Now, we do need to pass it through biblical standards. But I don't think that we need to be afraid to write what has been put inside of us. This next comment came from Tam Song, who's actually fellow author Patrick Todoroff. And he wrote, "Part and parcel to glorifying God is doing your work well, performing your craft with skill and diligence. Honor God equals honoring the work. If sex, which was God created, as mentioned, and is part of real life, is a critical part to the story that you've been given and are writing, then its absence in the name of piety would be false at best, bordering on laziness and disobedience at the worst." And that's a very good point, is if we're called to write something, then we need to write it. We definitely need to pray about it and double check with others and make sure that we're doing what's right. I guess this goes back to the point that when we write sexual content in Christian fiction, we're not talking about writing sexual content that is glorified. There are two different types of sexual content that can be written in Christian fiction, and one is between consenting adults, married consenting adults within biblical relationship, which is showing how beautiful sex can be. We're also talking about sex as sin in the sinful context, and sometimes I believe we need to write that type of sexual content to be true to the character, to reveal what people in real life are struggling with. Sexual sin is definitely something that everybody can relate to. And we need to write about it, and we need to have our characters go through certain things, and maybe sometimes it's for a redemptive purpose, and maybe sometimes it's just to show how awful sexual sin, what awful things that it can lead to show others to stay away, or to just be careful, or to be more responsible and appreciate it for what it really is. And the last comment here that I'm going to go ahead and read off, it's pretty much Mark Carver, one of our authors and co-founders. He wrote, "All things are lawful, but not all things are edifying." And that's pretty much 1 Corinthians 10:23, which states, "All things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify." And that means that we have been granted freedoms, not just here in America, but we're being granted godly freedoms to pursue what we are called to do. And as writers, we feel we're called to write. We feel that writing is our gift. It is what we have passion to do. So we're allowed to write. We've been given freedom to write whatever we want to write, but we need to be responsible with that. And this goes into what my opinion on the whole sexual content in Christian fiction is that I believe that it can be included in your fiction, and I think that it should be if it is definitely pertains to the characters, pertains to the plot, pertains to what is going on in your story. And I don't think we need to be afraid of it, but I do think that we should be held accountable to it, and I do believe that we should be responsible with it. And I would love to get your thoughts on all of this. So, leave your comments after the video, or go ahead and join us at our forum, which we're going to go ahead and open up this topic of discussion on our forum by the time this video is run. And you can just find it at thecrossoveralliance.com. Click on forum, and you'll find the topic in there. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is definitely a topic that we could talk about for hours and hours and days and weeks. And it's definitely one that's probably going to continually be challenged. One person did write in our, she did mention that the churches in our Alliance All Access discussion, she wrote that the church's attitude has kind of changed over the years too, about the church talking about sexual content and sexual matters, which is good. And this even helps authors go ahead and talk about it in their fiction, because people are struggling, and people need to know that other people are struggling with it, and they need to know what to do when they're struggling with it, and they need to also appreciate it in the right context, sexual content. So anyway, those are our thoughts for the moment. So go ahead and leave your comments, join us at the forum, and I look forward to talking to you guys in our next video. Thanks.